We start with eNCA senior reporter Siphamandla Goge on the construction mafia case. Siphamandla, good morning to you. Extortion cases are mushrooming across the country, Siphamandla. What are we expecting in court today?
Indeed, this is one of them, according to the prosecutor in this matter. Earlier on last week, when the 5 men were presenting their case in court, the prosecutor told the court that actually cases of extortion across South Africa are mushrooming, and it is believed that they are affecting the economy negatively. They amount to economic sabotage. This whole construction mafia thing stems from the fact that those who are classified or labeled as so-called construction mafias, they will go to a construction site, they will attempt to halt a project, they will demand a stake. If they are not given a stake, they will demand security contracts. If they are not given security contracts, they will demand employment for their own people that they will bring. If all those demands fail, then they will threaten to halt the project. They will say no one will work here if you are not giving into our demands. How did we get to where we are in terms of this case in Waklimba? It is alleged that a group of more than 30 people stormed a bridge construction project in Waklimba. Waklimba is part of eThekwini municipality, is regarded as Ward 1 of eThekwini. One of the biggest wards of eThekwini is in Waklimba. It is alleged that a group of more than 30 people went into that bridge construction project. They, according to the state, it is alleged that they demanded, 1, a security contract, number 2, they demanded that they be employed there, but also number 3, they demanded that outsiders should not be employed there, only local people should work there. When they realized that the management and the project leadership, they were not adhering to their demands, it is alleged by the state that they forced them to shut down the project, saying the project will not continue if these demands are not met. Now, that project was halted for 2 days. There were threats allegedly that were made by the group, hence 5 men were arrested. Now, according to the version of the defense, these 5 accused persons are saying, no, we did not go into that project to halt it or to stop it. We merely went there to inquire about why locals are not employed in that project, why outsiders are the ones who are employed in the project. They say they were advocating for community members, the locals, to be employed in that project, not to have outsiders coming in and taking job opportunities. Now, that bridge falls within the Department of Transport. It's a bridge in the rural village. It's part of the 3 bridges that are under construction in Waklimba. It was destroyed or affected during the 2021 or 2022 floods. So that infrastructure that was damaged across KwaZulu-Natal included bridges, roads, and other infrastructure. So that bridge that is at the center of this case is one of those that were affected or damaged during the floods in KwaZulu-Natal. So the state alleges that the 5 accused persons are regarded as the so-called ringleaders of the group that went there to demand security contracts, to demand jobs. And also in terms of the court processes today, it's expected that both parties, the defense and the state, will conclude their arguments. Whether the magistrate will hand down his judgment today, it's highly unlikely, because he needs to go through all the submissions and arguments that would have been made, and then consider the circumstances and the evidence that would have been presented, and then write down his judgment to be delivered at a later date, probably towards the end of this week.
A senior reporter, Siphamandla Goge, with that live update from court. He'll continue to keep you informed as court proceedings proceed. Let's now get you some editor's insight. Right, I'm joined today by eNCA editor Paul Dunn for today's Editor's Insight. Paul, good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning as we try and get some further insight into some of the top stories of the day. And we start with this case. As I said in the beginning, it does seem that there is a mushrooming of extortion court cases at the moment.
Yes, good morning, Jenna-Leigh. And it's all, a lot of them are linked, like in this case, to the construction industry. And you've got a situation where it goes to the heart of our economy as well, because it's often, like in this case, it was an infrastructure development project, a bridge or bridges that were damaged during floods 2.5 years ago in KwaZulu-Natal that had to be rebuilt or built from scratch. You see that, for example, in the Western Cape with some of the housing projects that are delayed and halted because of this kind of criminal behavior. And we need to call it what it is. It is criminal behavior. Now, of course, we can't make a judgment call on this specific case yet. That's in the hands of the courts to decide. Sipho Mandla explaining there that the 5 accused, of course, are insisting that they are innocent, that they innocently, in their version of events, only wanted to know why locals are not employed in this project and why people, according to their version of events, were brought in from outside to come and do the work. We will have to see, first of all, what the magistrate decides about their bail application, and then, of course, how this case proceeds. But extortion cases, as you are saying, mushrooming, we saw it in the recent crime statistics as well, often linked to the construction industry, or in other cases where business owners are being threatened. If they're not willing to pay protection money, they or a family member or family members are kidnapped and a ransom is being demanded.
And as you are saying, it's mushrooming. There's a lot of cases, and many people are asking the question, is it a case of an increase of extortion that we are seeing, or is it a case of the media is paying more attention and therefore the law enforcement are trying to catch up with it?
I think it's a bit of both. It does feel as if, just if you look at the statistics as well from a police crime statistics kind of angle, that there has definitely been an increase, but I think it also has been in the public spotlight, in the media spotlight over the last, I would say, year or so. So I think it's a bit of both, and one gets the sense that, say, for example, 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, we would have had the challenge of corruption and fraud being committed when it comes to these kinds of construction infrastructure development projects. It seems like that focus has now shifted to these kind of crimes of extortion.
One of the interesting things in this specific case as well, Paul, is that the community is also insisting that the accused are innocent.
Yes.
They are saying that they are not part of the construction mafia. It's interesting to see the take that the community is taking on this case.
And I think it would also be interesting from a legal point of view, because it's not just in terms of how do the police deal with these kinds of cases, but now also our legal system, our court system, is being confronted with more and more of these kinds of cases. And the question, one of the questions in my mind is, from a legal point of view, is how easy or difficult is it to prove that somebody is actually part of a construction mafia syndicate?
Mm-hmm. Because if what they are saying were to be true, if I just go to a site and I say, hey, you guys should employ more local people, how does that constitute extortion, for instance?
I think part of the problem with a case, or part of the challenge with a case like this, is a lot of the evidence might be based on hearsay instead of documentary proof. And then, of course, it becomes difficult for a magistrate or a judge or whoever is the presiding officer in this case, if it goes to a higher court perhaps, to come to a verdict of guilty or not guilty.
But one would have to trust that the NPA would not prosecute if there were not sufficient evidence.
Yeah, I think so. I think the NPA surely is aware of the sensitivity of these kinds of allegations, of these kinds of cases, and how important it is that if you take a case like this to court, you've got to be very sure that you've got a strong enough case.
Hopefully at some point we might also see some high-level officials prosecuted, perhaps also some corrupt police, more and more of that, because some of the allegations are that we have some local councillors involved in it, that we have some police officers involved in these extortion mafias as well.
I think that's the other very difficult thing about this matter, is that we use the term syndicate very loosely sometimes, but it's very difficult to pinpoint everybody who is involved in this. There have been allegations. There's even a case in KwaZulu-Natal now where some of the extortion charges are against police officers, local councillors, definitely, because it's often also about municipalities and the kind of contracts and tenders they award. So, yeah, we do need to get to a point of also finding those people and bringing them to court.
Absolutely. Well, the net does seem to be closing in on extortion mafias. Our senior reporter, Sipha Mandla Goge, will continue to bring you the details from that court case. It's now 11 minutes past 9. We're going to continue to take a look at some of the biggest stories of the day with our editor, Paul Dunn, when we return. Do stay with us right here on eNCA. And we'll also look at this, the case against 4 accused charged in connection with the disappearance of 6-year-old Jocelyn Smith continues. That's one of the stories we'll take a look at when we return. Welcome back. Now, the case against 4 accused charged in connection with the disappearance of 6-year-old Jocelyn Smith is set to continue today in the Vredenburg Magistrates Court in the Western Cape. Now, Jocelyn's mother, Callie, then Jacqueline Apollos, Stefano van Rijn and Laurentia Lombard are facing charges of trafficking for the purpose of exploitation and kidnapping. It's now 7 months since Jocelyn went missing from her Middelpos home while being cared for by her mother's boyfriend. The state is set to give an update on its investigation. A very much needed update, Paul, because as I said, it's now been 7 months and still no trace of Jocelyn Smith.
Well, I read a staggering statistic this morning when I was preparing for this. Missing Children South Africa says that a child goes missing in South Africa every 5 hours. That's about 5 children a day. Where it gets even worse is that 23%, or 1 in 4 of those children that go missing are never found, not alive or dead. And Jocelyn, unfortunately, Jocelyn Smith has become part of that last statistic now. In this case, you've got the added dimension of her mother and the mother's boyfriend being part of the 4 people who are being charged. Imagine the trauma for the rest of that family. The not knowing what happened to my child in the case of her father, for example, and the grandparents that we've spoken to before here on eNCA as well. And I think that for me is the almost spine-chilling element of this specific story. It so happened that the Jocelyn Smith story became very prominent in the media, but also just think of all the other children who go missing that we never get a chance to report on, that are never found. That for me is really yeah, I think spine-chilling is the right word.
And the community, besides her family, the community want to know what happened to Jocelyn. I was watching this morning the story done by Nobusutu, I think it is, where the community members were saying that they're hoping that details will come out in court so that they can at least know, as you said, what happened to Jocelyn.
And I think it's this, a part of that story of Nobusutu was also about a small group of community members who say they won't give up looking for Jocelyn, even if it is 7 months after her disappearance. But it's this wait and see kind of game with a case like this. I mean, on the bright side, if there is a bright side, at least 4 people were arrested, they have been charged, they have gone to court, the case has gone to court. But one wonders how long the family and the community will have to wait to actually get the answers they are looking for. Because the accused will, at one or other stage, I presume, have to testify in this case. Will they give truthful testimony? That's another matter altogether. And of course, with so much time having lapsed after her disappearance, how difficult does it make the job of the police and everybody else who's supposed to be looking for Jocelyn to still find her?
And we also saw in that package that those community members, as you say, they are still actively searching, looking for Jocelyn. What would be interesting is also to find out the police's search for Jocelyn. Where did that trace stop? Yeah.
And I think one has to have some kind of empathy with the police in a case like this as well, especially if we go back to those statistics that I mentioned from Missing Children in South Africa. So many children going missing across the country. It must be extremely difficult because imagine yourself in the shoes of the police for a moment. You're dealing with a traumatized family. In this case, you're dealing with a whole community, I think, that's been traumatized. And there are so many other priorities, so many other cases you have to look at as well in that area. It becomes an almost impossible task, I think, for the police as well.
And if we think back, Paul, you remember it was before elections and there was a lot of political interest in Jocelyn's disappearance as well. The police complaining at some stage that all the interference is sending the police on a wild goose chase at some point.
And then after the elections, that most of that interest has died down. I mean, now it's basically us in the media and people in the community who keep the story alive.
Well, hopefully today we will get 1 point closer to finding out what happened to Jocelyn Smith. But I think, as you said, the real details will come out when the accused take the stand and we are able to hear a bit more. So Jocelyn Smith still missing. We're keeping that alive for you right here on eNCA by tracking that court case for you today as well. For now, let's shift our attention to this. Tributes continue to pour in for the late former Cabinet Minister Pravin Gordhan. His family home in Pretoria has been a hive of activity since news of his death broke, with mourners visiting to pay their respects. Now, Gordhan died on Friday after a short battle with cancer. President Cyril Ramaphosa has granted him a special official funeral in Durban on Thursday. We will continue to monitor logistical arrangements for his official funeral. Paul, obviously his legacy has been celebrated here on Channel since Friday. Many of his friends speaking about his legacy as well, and we'll continue to do that.
Yes. I think Pravin Gordhan's death has really given us as South Africans a chance to maybe just pause and reflect for a few days about his contribution. The contribution he made during the struggle leading up to 1994, the contribution he made as an ANC MP, the contribution he made as a SARS commissioner. I mean, I think it can't be emphasized enough that under his leadership in that 10 years at SARS, SARS became one of the most efficient tax services in the world. Also in terms of the kind of technology that they were using. We, of course, know what happened to SARS after that, when during the Zuma era, when parts of SARS was also, unfortunately, became part of of being captured. That has now slowly been restored under Edward Kieswetter. But also then his contributions as Minister of Finance, as Minister of Public Enterprises. There's been some people who've been very harsh in their response. Thinking about somebody like the economist Dawie Rood, for example, about specifically what happened with public enterprises like South African Airways under
the EFF as well.
Pravin Gordhan, EFF as well. But I think the other side of that coin is that by the time Pravin was appointed in that role as Minister of public enterprises in this country had already been captured, had already been plundered, most of the money had already been stolen. Whether you look at Eskom or SAA, it was, again, almost an impossible task to turn that around.
But also, by nature of politics, Paul, I don't think any political figure his or her legacy will ever be void of justified or unjustified controversy. That's the nature of politics.
That's true. But I think the overwhelming response after Pravin Gordhan's death has been to laud him for the contribution he made during the liberation struggle, but also after 1994. I mean, stretching over the last 30 years, literally up to 3.5 months before his death when he retired as Minister of Public Enterprises. This is an impressive legacy, and whether it's his legacy at SARS or his legacy as Minister of Finance, it will live on for a very long time, I believe, in South Africa.
And then every time an ANC stalwart passes on, one cannot help but reflect on where that leaves, where that person's absence leaves the party.
Yes, especially now in the context after the May 29th election with the ANC with just over 40% of the support. He didn't really speak about it publicly, but one wonders what Pravin Gordhan made of what happened during this year's election. And in his wise counsel, what he would have said to somebody like, for example, President Cyril Ramaphosa and the top 7 leaders of the ANC. We saw somebody like Naledi Pandor recently on JJ Tabane's show saying she didn't see this coming. She didn't see the ANC plummeting to way below 50%. So it would have been interesting to get into Pravin Gordhan's mind about what happened on 29 May and also now with the Government of National Unity. And
then, of course, just lastly, as I said towards the end there, that the logistical details will still be communicated around Thursday's funeral, but we can expect leading up to that, that we will also be seeing a lot of tributes, for instance, Paul.
Yes, I think there will definitely be more tributes to him in the next few days. And I think it will definitely also be a well-attended funeral. I presume, since it is an official funeral, that the President will also be delivering a eulogy there. So I think, that Pravin Gordhan's legacy will be celebrated and remembered for a long time to come. And I think it is a celebration. I know somebody has died and stalwart has died, but in a way this is also time to reflect on his legacy and to celebrate that.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, thank you so much for your time today and reflecting on some of the top stories. We do appreciate your time. That is, of course, eNCA editor Paul Dunn with today's Editor's Insight.